Final segment, Sons of the Shoe with Spencer German riding solo this week with no Nick Wilson. I do want to remind you guys, we got Alec Dietz of USA Today. He covers the Oregon Ducks for the USA Today. Coming on next week's show, we'll record with him, I think, like Thursday night, so the episode should drop Friday morning. So stay tuned for that because we know how important that matchup with Oregon is going to be this year on Ohio State's schedule. And we obviously know that that could be almost like a budding rivalry. So we're going to get the opposite perspective, go behind enemy lines, if you will, and get that perspective on what lies ahead for this first year of this new remade Big Ten and specifically Oregon. So looking forward to that conversation. But in the meantime, we have a conversation to finish up right here on this episode, and it is our segment that we've brought back more recently to lead us up to the season. We'll obviously do it during the season as well. But it's a segment we like to call 4 Down Territory, where we talk about 4 different topics from both Ohio State, but also around the college football world. And we start with topic number 1, which is the Big Ten commercial is back, and it is beautiful, folks. It spans the country now. You start in California, you start in Oregon, or Washington rather. You work your way down to Oregon, down the West Coast, down to LA. You got you get the Rose Bowl popping up on the little map. You get USC Stadium, the Coliseum popping up on the map. You make your way to Nebraska, and then it picks up where it used to be with all the Big Ten teams of lore that we've known for the last several years, and finishes out once again on the East Coast with Rutgers and all those teams. And you get this beautiful, beautiful map where it shows you just the reach that is the Big Ten Conference now. It's a beautiful, beautiful thing. I wasn't sure if they were going to remake the commercial in a different way, use a different song. I actually am impartial to the version people have kind of made themselves, where they put the Game of Thrones theme behind it, because the Game of Thrones intro, for those of you who maybe haven't seen it, is like this map of Westeros, which is the nation that they live in the books, obviously in the show, and it like goes from like house to house all the way through, and it pops up. So I like that version that people have kind of turned it into, the viral version that they've made. But yeah, it's back. It's beautiful, and it includes the West Coast. I'm glad they kept this thing alive. I'm glad they kept it going, and I can't wait to see it on my TV for the first time, because I only saw it on Twitter so far. But that first time it comes, that commercial is iconic. Like, when you're sitting, it might be a commercial break during an Ohio State game. You get up to use the bathroom. But if the first commercial that plays out of the break and you hear that music play, you stop in your tracks and you turn around and you look at the screen and you watch it play all the way out. You just have to. It is like a rite of passage. If you're a fan of a Big Ten team, you watch the Big Ten commercial that spans the map and pops up with the stadiums and little iconic elements of each school. It's the best. It's the best. And I'm glad they kept it. And I'm glad it's back for the expanded Big Ten. We'll leave that one there. We go to topic number 2, second down. Our second down topic is back in relation to College Football 25, which I have proudly started playing. I am on the train now. I'm all in. I started actually as Ohio State's first opponent this year at the University of Akron. I know it's like sacrilege working at another school in Ohio, but guys, if you play the game, you know you got to start at a small school and work your way up. So it's kind of like choose your favorite MAC school or your favorite non-Power 5 school. And I used to work at Akron, so I have an affinity for that school. And so I was like, I'll start at Akron. And the goal is that I hopefully work my way up and get to Ohio State one day. So when I get there, you guys will be the first to know on this podcast. But that's not where I wanted to start, actually, with this topic, because there are a bunch of patching that's going to be done to the game, because people are outraged by the unrealisticness of the college football playoff that plays out around their dynasty teams, where it's like NC State making the final and Coastal Carolina somehow sneaks their way in and makes the semifinal, and people can't believe that it's not this realistic thing. I want to know from you guys, though, do you like the fact that it's not realistic, and you like that there's some finicky teams in it? Because I am of the camp of this majority of people that have been complaining to the point where now it's getting patched, where I want it to feel realistic. even though I'm running a dynasty that might make the playoff, and that's not really realistic for Akron to actually make the playoff. Sorry, Akron, I'm just telling the truth. In real life, I want the rest of it to feel realistic. Like I want Georgia in there. I want Ohio State in there. I don't need Georgia losing to some random, Arkansas, some random night, or I don't need Georgia losing to like Old Dominion or something like that, or Dominion. Did I say Old Dominion? Like the country band. I think I said Old Dominion. No, it is Old Dominion. I was right. All right, never mind. I stand corrected by my own Google search. But yeah, I don't need Georgia losing to some fluky team and then not ending up in the playoff. I need Ohio State in there. I need Oregon in there. Like I want the big teams to be in there so that when I get there, there's a challenge and it's not some fluky thing. So I'm of that ilk. But are there people who are really that are you that upset if that happens? Because in retrospect, like maybe that's what you want out of your video games. You don't want the realistic what's going to play out in real life. You want to see some quirkiness where you have a MAC school actually make a run to the championship and then get curb stomped by whoever. What do you think? Let us know your thoughts at @SpenceC2_ and in the comments on the 92 to the Fan YouTube channel. Third down. We move on to third down, and this is where I pivot back to specifically Ohio State because we've talked a lot, even in this episode, about the frontline guys at the running back position, Travion Henderson, Quinshon Judkins. We know how great they are. But what's one thing to keep an eye on, I think, throughout camp and what is said about this group beyond those two and early in the season, like when you're playing in Akron and Ohio State's up big and they start putting their subs in, right? Like who is performing behind those two guys? And there's two names that obviously are going to stand out. Now, I actually was really excited because TC Caffey, he had a really good spring game. And I remember it was in my notes when I was at the spring game this past April that he was playing really, really well in the snaps that he got. But he tore his ACL recently, so he's out for the year. So that leaves James Peoples and Sam Williams-Dixon as kind of the two guys who are next in line behind Judkins and Henderson. And this is important because you no longer have Dallin Hayden, who we know transferred to Colorado. Chip Trainum also transferred to Kentucky this offseason. And those are two big blows because I actually thought Dallin Hayden in particular was kind of that next man up in this group. But once they got Judkins, I think he kind of realized the writing was on the wall for him, where he just wasn't going to get the carries. He was going to get somewhere else. And I can't blame him for trying to pursue something else. But it's a very unproven group behind Judkins and Henderson. And because we know Henderson's injury history in recent years, it is a little bit concerning that you don't have some greater depth maybe at that position. And especially now that Caffey's going to be done for the year. So that's something to follow because seeing how those two guys perform as underclassmen on this team, newer recruits on this team, could come in handy down the stretch of the season if Henderson's dealing with an injury or whatever, because we know Ryan Day is likely going to use multiple backs in different formations and different concepts and different things that they're going to try to do. So it's just something to keep an eye on. And I do think it's notable because, it's a top-heavy group right now. And behind it, it's a big guessing game in terms of like what's next at that position for Ohio State after the season when we're assuming Henderson and Judkins both end up going on to the NFL. That'll do it for third down. And to get us out of here, our fourth down topic is which non-Ohio State game are you most excited about in 2024? I'm going to cheat a little bit here and give you like a top three. I'm sorry. I know it's cheating. I said one game. I'm giving you three. But I do think there's three that have me like really intrigued. And I think it's because they have an impact, I think, on like what the playoff could look like, this new hierarchy of teams in different conferences, expanded playoff. These games are going to matter a lot. And so if we're leaving Ohio State out of it, because we know like Ohio State, Michigan, massive game. We know that. Ohio State, Oregon, massive game. We've talked about that ad nauseum. We don't even have to talk about Ohio State, Michigan being a big game. We just know. So there are a lot of Ohio State games that matter this year, or several, a handful. But if we're leaving them out of it, I think the three games that I am most intrigued by and will be like glued to start to finish that aren't Ohio State. September 7th, Texas at Michigan. First off, it's the college football championship matchup that we didn't get, because if Texas would have beaten Washington, they would have obviously played Michigan, and we could have seen how that played out. Now, it's a different Michigan team, so I'm not leaning into that a ton as my reasoning why, but this is kind of like this new look Big Ten with an old school, staple program that's been here for a long time in Michigan, and the new look SEC in Texas, and they square off early in the season. Early in the season, we don't always get a bunch of these matchups with kind of cross. Well, actually, we do sometimes, but like you only get so many of the cross-conference matchups like this. So that's one I think out of the gate early on that has me intrigued. And I also think it's going to establish like how good is Michigan really in the aftermath of all the guys that they lost in their championship run last year. And that could set the tone for like, okay, if they win that game, yeah, they're not fucking around. Like Ohio State's going to have to be, on their P's and Q's to be ready for another tough matchup with Michigan. It's always a tough matchup, but if they kind of get back to prominence and like are actually competing for a championship, scary proposition for Ohio State, obviously. So I think that's where I start. The other two games are both out of the SEC, and one of the teams we already mentioned, Texas and Georgia, October 19th. Another big test for Texas. New kids on the block in the SEC. How are they really going to compete in this conference against the team that, now that Nick Saban's out of the way, is considered the gold standard in that conference, and maybe even in college football with Kirby Smart and Georgia and Carson Beck and all that. So that's a massive one. I think we'll all be paying close attention to that game because, again, it's another one that has big implications on how the SEC is going to play out. Are both those teams going to make the playoffs, or is only one of those teams going to make the playoffs? If Texas were to lose to Michigan and then lose to Georgia, I'm not saying two lost teams can't recover with this new playoff format, but they're already at a disadvantage, and maybe they don't make the conference, the conference championship game. What does that mean for them? So there's some different things in play for that game as well. And I know a lot of people are probably guessing I'm going to go Georgia, Alabama. And I do think that game matters, of course, because, well, first of all, it's Georgia, Alabama. But secondly, because it's the Kalen DeBoer Alabama team against the consistent as ever Kirby Smart Georgia team. Where does he pick up in the aftermath of Nick Saban retiring? We're all going to be wanting to see that and watch that, and it's going to matter. And that game is on September 28th. But I'm actually going in a different direction here. It is still Georgia, but I'm going Georgia and Ole Miss in November. And the reason I like this, the way I did this, was because I got a game in September that matters, a game in October that matters, and a game in November that matters. And the reason I say that is because I've been saying it on this show already. It is put up or shut up time for Lane Kiffin, all right? Lane Kiffin has kind of coasted with Ole Miss being good and, threatening some upsets, maybe pulling one off every now and then, but he has yet to win the SEC. He has yet to be a real contender in that conference. And now that Nick Saban is out of the way, I want to see, like, is he legitimately going to take the baton and be this great coach and seize the moment here? Or is this going to just be more of the same where he's like good, but not great? And there still is sort of this, like, the ceiling that he has yet to eclipse. And he can't quite get over it yet. Like, I am fascinated to see if he can seize that moment and become almost this consistent contender that actually threatens Georgia more regularly, or if it's just going to be more of the same for Lane Kiffin. So I have my eye on that game for sure. And so those I think are going to be my three that I give you as the answers of my three non-Ohio State matchups, even though I said just pick one. My three non-Ohio State matchups that I'm most intrigued by going into the 2024 season. What games are on your viewing menu for this season? Non-Ohio State. That's the key. Can't be an Ohio State game. Games that you're most interested in watching, that you'll be glued to outside of when Ohio State is playing. I gave you my three. What do you got? We also talked about the running back room, College Football 25, and the Big Ten commercial being back in this segment. If you got any thoughts on those, hit me up at @SpenC2_. And, of course, as always, in the 92 Through the Fan YouTube comment section. Comment sections can be dirty, grimy places at times. But generally, you guys keep it pretty clean. You keep it pretty fun. And I do need to get better about responding to you guys. So I will work on that. We're all works in progress, right? That's always the line. We're always trying to work to get better and be better people and be better at our jobs. I need to get better at responding to you guys in the comments. So I'm going to try to do that this week. If you drop me a comment in the 92 to the Fan YouTube channel, I will get back to you. I am making that promise this week that I will get back to you. Please don't hold it against me if I break my promise. I'm really going to try not to, but if I do, don't hold it against me. That'll do it for another episode of Sons of the Shoe. Excited to be back next week with Nick as we'll talk to Alec Dietz, covers Oregon for the USA Today. We'll get his thoughts on the new massive expansion that is the Big Ten, Oregon's place in it, Oregon versus Ohio State if it's a budding rivalry, all those different things with him next week. So stay tuned for that. It should drop next Friday. In the meantime, we are 3 weeks out from the start of college football season, 4 weeks out. Let's see if I can get it on the camera here for those who are watching, not listening. 4 weeks out from Ohio State's first game of the season. Guys, it's right around the corner. I implore you to like, follow, subscribe, comment, whatever it is that you do to interact with your podcast. You can find us in the Odyssey app, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, at the 92 to the Fan YouTube channel, which is where I encourage you to comment as well, but also Apple Podcasts in case you forgot. We appreciate you guys as always. We'll be back with another episode of Sons of the Shoe next week. Until then, as always, go Bucks.